Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer. Welcome to another video. This time we're gonna take a look at this brand new 7Artisans 85mm F1.8 short telephoto lens. This is available for the Nikon Z mount and the Sony E mount. And let's also get the compulsory disclaimer out of the way. 7Artisans sent this lens to me for a review. They also sent a couple of their new filters, a true color variable ND filter and some sort of a protective UV filter. I haven't had a chance to test out these filters yet, but if you're looking for a new ND filter or some sort of a protective filter for your lens, at least now you have one more option to choose from. Anyway, they did not sponsor this video, no money changed hands, and everything I'm going to say is my own opinion. This lens is not particularly large or heavy, but it's not super compact either. This weighs in at about 452 grams and the filter size is 62 millimeters. So not super heavy, not super light. However, when mounted on the Nikon Z5, on which I shot all my test pictures, the whole combo weighs in at about 1200 grams, 1.2 kilograms. And for some that might be too heavy for casual photo walking or that kind of shooting, and that's good to keep in mind if you're planning to get this lens. In this video I'm going to mention a few things that I don't like and a few things that I like about this lens. But before we go into that, let's take a look at some pictures that I shot on this lens. I'm gonna start with the dislikes and then I'm gonna move on to the likes, so I can end this video with positive feelings. The first dislike is the autofocus performance on the Nikon Z5. Even in bright sunlight, the autofocus struggled several times, and I honestly was a bit frustrated at times when I was trying to shoot something. Some of you may want to point out that the Nikon Z5 autofocus is crap, but I don't agree. I have mounted quite a few lenses on my Z5 and I've never had any major problems with the autofocus. And also I think a budget lens like this might be attractive for a Z5 owner and not so attractive for a Z9 or Z8 owner. Those people can afford to buy Nikon first-party lenses, but I'd be curious to see if the autofocus performance is better on a more expensive Nikon camera body or on a Sony camera body. It's also possible that a future firmware update might improve the autofocus performance, but this is only speculation right now. The next dislike is the backlight performance, which can be pretty wild if you shoot into a bright light source like into the sun. You can get all kinds of reflections and flare. And while it's not necessarily a deal breaker and certainly nothing unique with these budget lenses, almost every affordable or budget lens has that same exact problem if you shoot into the light. You can sometimes avoid those reflections and flares. Just shade the lens with your hand or change the camera angle just slightly and the flare goes away. The next dislike is the aperture ring. I generally like aperture rings, but this particular aperture ring is not the nicest I have seen. First of all, no clicks, which is a big downside for me and for photography. I don't really understand why they insist on making these clickless aperture rings. Maybe it's cheaper to do it that way, I don't know. And the aperture ring is a little bit stiff, and because it's so flush with the lens barrel, it's sometimes hard to grip the The aperture ring, you grip the lens barrel at the same time, and it's sometimes a little bit hard to turn the ring. Another curiosity is that there is the A position at the end of the scale, so you can control the aperture from the camera. However, the aperture scale also goes beyond f16. There are markings for f16 and 1/3 of a stop, f16 and 2/3 of a stop, but there are no such aperture values. f16 is the highest f number you can have with this lens. So it's a bit weird that they put the scale beyond f16. And one more dislike before I go to the likes. This lens has quite pronounced longitudinal chromatic aberrations. It's nothing unique, even some much more expensive lenses have the same issue, but still it's worth mentioning because sometimes it can be a little bit distracting, especially if you shoot at the wide open aperture, and sometimes it's also really hard to correct or get rid of in post. Something to be aware of, not necessarily a deal breaker, but to my taste, the longitudinal chromatic aberrations are a little bit too pronounced with this lens. Before I go to the likes, let's take a look at some more pictures that I shot on this lens. And now to the likes, and the first like is the build quality. All metal construction except for the glass elements, of course, and the plastic lens hood. When you handle this lens, it doesn't feel like a $299 budget lens. It feels much more premium when you handle it and when you mount it on your camera. The next like is the sharpness. This lens is sharp, already wide open, and I would not hesitate to use this wide open if necessary. But of course the sharpness improves by stopping down, and from about f2.8 on, this lens is very sharp from corner to corner, excellent results. And the next like is the feature set, which is very good for such an inexpensive lens. There is a switch for autofocus, manual focus, there's one programmable button, there is the aperture ring, there is a manual focus ring, there is a USB port for a possible firmware update. No weather sealing though for this money, you can't expect everything, but all in all, very nice feature set for such an inexpensive lens. Before my final conclusion, let's take a look at some more pictures, because after all, it's the pictures that matter, nothing else. My final opinion is a bit of a mixed bag. I like the sharpness, I like the build quality, I like the feature set, and I might be able to live with the mediocre backlight performance and with the mediocre longitudinal chromatic aberrations performance. However, it's the autofocus performance, which at least on the Nikon Z5 camera body is so far below mediocre that it makes it really hard for me to recommend this lens. There you have it, my opinion on the 7Artisans 85mm F1.8 prime lens. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll definitely see you soon in the next video.